Welcome back. Today, I want to invite you to reflect on generosity. Let's talk about how and in what ways we can become more generous. But first, let me talk about the three types of generosity that the Gita talks about. The Bhagavad Gita is like the Bible to the Hindus. It is a sacred text with 700 stanzas, which are only about the wisdom of living a human life. In that discourse, it's a conversation between God and man. God talks about three kinds of generosity. And let me explain that to you so that we can get started to talk about it. The first one is a generosity that is blind. It's like many of us do it. Someone comes to the door and asks for a donation. We say, and we just want to get that person off our back. We just make a check or something and we give it to them. Or a generosity that just because you belong to a particular temple or a church, you just think, fine, I'll just give it so that I can belong. That's blind generosity. Okay. And he says that's the lowest form of generosity. Then he talks about the next stage. The next stage is transactional generosity. I need a favor from you, so I'm going to be generous with you. Whether that generosity is in the form of money or things, it's almost like a barter. So it's not real generosity, but it looks like as if I'm being very generous. And then the third form of generosity, which is the kindest and the highest form, is the one that expects nothing, is just someone being generous because they want to be generous. They want to live from an open-hearted state of mind. It's not about the other person. In fact, the other person is simply giving us an opportunity to open our heart, and we know that opening our heart and living from that state is the highest vibe we can live from. My channel, YouTube channel, is called Raise Your Vibe, and I talk about all those ways in which we can engage with life in a way that raises our vibe. Generosity is one such area where we don't realize the opportunities life gives us to practice real generosity. And let's not think about generosity as only giving of things, money. It's so much more than that. Think about it. When you pay someone a compliment, a genuine compliment, you are being generous. Generosity in words, generosity in spirit. When you let someone have the last word, even though you may have an even more powerful argument to counter it, and you realize at some point in the conversation that this person really needs a victory. And when you realize this person really needs a victory, and you say to yourself, I'm going to let this person have a victory. Where it doesn't compromise your values, where it's not a point that's going to be earth-shaking for you, but it may make a big difference to another. And you decide you let that person have the last word. That's generosity. For no reason, that person is never even going to know that you've made that contribution. When you practice active listening, what is active listening? Active listening is allowing a person to speak and you listen with an open heart and an open mind. You help that person to unburden themselves. Maybe there is a problem they need to share. By unburdening themselves, they will feel better. And you are generous enough to let them do that. Sometimes this last one can be a little tricky because there may be someone in our life who keeps telling the same story over and over again. And we might think, oh my God, there he goes again, or there she goes again. But what if we thought, this person may need to retell that story 400 or 500 times before they are able to relieve themselves of the pain that this memory has caused them. And while we cannot say yes to that retelling, to listening to the retelling many, many times, maybe once in a while, we say to ourselves, I know what's coming, but I'm going to listen. I'm going to receive this person and this person's stories, and I'm going to listen. Active listening is an act of generosity. When we start looking at generosity not as a thing on the outside, but as an internal posture of opening your heart and being available to another person and their needs in a certain way, realizing what their need might be and being generous enough to let them receive that. That is the practice of generosity that the Gita talks about, where it is only for the pure act of wanting to make a difference to another person. It's not about getting acknowledged, getting credit. It's not about reciprocity. It is only for the sheer joy of giving. And when we practice generosity from that place, where it is simply for the joy of giving, it changes the lives of both the giver and the receiver. It connects us at deeper levels, and somewhere we lift one another up when we are generous in this way. So think about it and ask yourself, what are the ways in which I can practice generosity? What are the relationships in which I hold back and refrain from practicing generosity? And what does that tell me about myself? Because the practice of generosity requires us to get over some of our own fears. Because whether it is generosity with money and we have to get over our fear of scarcity, or it is generosity in other ways that require us to get over our fear of being less than or giving someone a victory, they reveal to us fears that are there inside of us that are asking to be overcome. People in our life with whom we cannot be generous are opportunities for us to see our own fears that keep us from being generous. And these opportunities help us to look, to recognize them and to ask ourselves, how generous can I be? Maybe on a trajectory of 0 to 100, today I can only be 3% generous with this person where I have been 0 at. Yeah, that can be 3. Can I be 4%? In this way, as we up the scale, we are really opening ourselves up and we are raising our vibe, because such a generosity is not transactional. It is not blind, but it is intentional. It is an intention expressed as generosity. So try practicing this and see how it makes a difference to who you are, how it changes your life, how it changes your relationships, and reap the benefits of genuine generosity.